In this episode of Violet Evergarden, Violet learns about the concept of a happy ending. She then has the stark realization that she herself has erased the existence of many happy endings. If you don't feel anything after watching this episode of Violet Evergarden, maybe you're made of stone. I'm not sure, but this episode right here really affected me right here. Just so heavy with the emotion and the amazing, beautiful imagery, which I would say arguably is the best we've seen from Violet Evergarden. There's a scene at the end of this episode of Violet who is skipping across a lake with a parasol, and it's done with such great camera movements, color, and emotion that just, I can't get over it. It's just awesome. It's so well done. The actual story in this episode, however, is very simple. Basically, again, it's just another one of those stories where Violet meets someone, they have a similar problem, they work through it, and that's basically it. It's the formula of Violet Evergarden. We've seen it from the last couple of episodes, and it continues here. However, I do love the way that this episode ends, as we finally get a big confirmation about Gilbert. But before we get to that, let's talk about the actual story. In this one, Violet travels to meet this author by the name of Oscar Webster, who is apparently very well-renowned. He's also a drunken recluse, and he lives in squalor, and he's getting ready to write his next big play. He's having writer's block, so that's why the auto-memory dolls are coming in to help him out. Of course, there's immediate conflict between him and Violet, as everything in his house is just a mess. He's constantly drinking. He can't focus on his work, which forces Violet to transform from an auto-memory doll into an auto-maid. She basically has to clean up the entire house, pick up food for him, cook, clean, the whole nine. She's doing everything to try and bring him back to some sense of normalcy so that they can actually write this play, which proves to be very difficult, as the main shtick of this episode is that Oscar Webster is actually suffering over the death of his daughter, who looked remarkably like Violet herself, and she died of an illness, and because of that, he's basically just been in deep depression for a long time, and the actual story that he's writing is very reflective of his daughter, who goes by the name of Olivia, and he's writing about a character named Olive, who leaves her father to go and fight against monsters with the power of magic, friendship, and fairies, but then finds that she can't return to her father, and that's what leads him to have this big writer's block moment and the sudden realization that, in a way, he can sort of come to terms with the death of his daughter by writing a story where his daughter returns home to the father. And of course, it's Violet who makes this happen, but it's all done mostly through the imagery, which is something that I really appreciate, and that's something that I think this series is really exceptional at. A lot of the times, things don't need to be said to get a full understanding of them, and this episode right here, I think, was the best representation of that in the entire series. It's all based around this parasol, which is a umbrella that used to belong to Oscar's daughter, and of course Violet finds it, she uses it, it looks remarkably like her, and there's this whole thing where there's this flashback sequence of his daughter saying that she's going to fly and jump across the lake, almost like a bird, skipping on the leaves. Violet actually does this at the end of the episode, making sure to go as far as 3 steps before actually plummeting in the water. But while all of this is happening, this is when Oscar finally realizes how he's going to end his play and how he's going to finally get over the death of his daughter by confronting it and using it as motivation for his story. It's this beautiful image of Violet skipping across the water in slow motion, done with some of the best animation that I've ever seen and some of the most beautiful colors that I've ever seen pop off the screen. It's a really memorable moment, and it's really, I think, the bow on top of the package of this amazing episode right here. And really, they could have ended it right there. You know, it's got a nice, solid, happy ending. He gets over the death of his daughter, writes an amazing play, Violet ends up saving someone, but it actually ends in a completely different way than I expected, and I love the way it ended, because it's showing again that she's starting to understand the complexities of emotions and how to fully express them. It's at this moment that she realizes that even though this play ended in a happy ending for everyone, she herself has ended the lives of many people. basically robbing them of their happy ends. This all happens at once, and it causes her to have something of a mental breakdown, which gets even worse when she arrives back in town, meeting Miss Evergarden, who tells her that Gilbert has passed away. She immediately runs up to the post office, and she wants some answers. She wants to know, is Gilbert alive? Is he missing in action? What's going on with this guy? And finally, we do learn that he is simply just missing in action. We don't know if he's dead or not. The building that he in was supposedly exploded. The dog tags were left behind, but no body was ever found. And man, this is going to be the part of the series that's going to get people just like watching every single week. It's a really great hook. In the back of my mind, Gilbert is dead. We'll never see him again. However, if he is alive, out there doing something, I'm really interested to see what his story is going to be and how it's all eventually going to tie into his reunion with seeing Violet again. I think it's going to add just so much more depth to this series by doing that, and by giving us that answer that he could potentially be alive. Like, just, I can hear the fangirls already. So, I just can't wait to see how it's all going to end. She doesn't get a clear answer. She ends up running away crying. And that's the end of this week's episode, with the first half being incredibly enlightening and happy, and the second half just absolutely ripping your heart out. So, what's the rundown on this episode of Violet Evergarden? I think the other parts of my review sort of like said it best. This episode right here was just a roller coaster of emotions, but it was important to see the development of Violet as an actual person, and I think you get to see most of that come alive in this episode right here. Most of the previous episodes she came across as very cold and robotic. In this one, she's starting to respond to the emotions and quirks of people in a really interesting way. She wasn't taking any of Oscar's crap and was being very forceful, taking things away from him and telling him how things are actually going to go, and expressing a lot of emotion while she did it. I really loved that. In the moment at the end, while it is incredibly sad, it is great to see that she is starting to understand this thing called emotion. Seeing it come alive with this character has been really great. I have to say, that's definitely one of the best journeys about this series. But the fact that it's tied up with such great production value, if you're not watching this and you're a fan of animation and artwork in general, check this one out. If anything, even if you don't like the story, you're going to see some beautiful imagery. And just like every other anime series that has food, what is it about anime that makes food look so good? After watching this episode, all I know is I want some spaghetti carbonara, and I want it right now. It's amazing. If you want to watch a really cool video about why food and anime is so awesome, Gigook just put one out like a week ago, and it's really freaking great. I highly recommend it. It really highlights why food and anime looks so freaking great. So I loved this episode. It was just gorgeous, to say the least, and it was just, like I said, a roller coaster of emotions. How it started out dark, got really happy, then got really sad again by the end of the episode. But it was all dressed up with some fantastic characterization and some just knock it out of the park beautiful imagery, especially that lake scene. Check it out, guys. It's Violet Evergarden. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. Make sure to tell me all your thoughts of this episode in the comment section below, and what you hope to see from the rest of the series. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, stay down, baby.